Here are some of the arcade games coming for the Atari 5200 Super System. Cartridges only the Atari Super System will play. And the Super System versions are the best versions of the great arcade hits you can play at home. The Atari 5200 Super Games. You can't play them anywhere else. Only on the Atari 5200 Super System.
The Atari 5200 is probably one of the most overlooked consoles of this time period, but that's partially due to the fact that this console was released the year before the video game crash, and as a result didn't sell well and was quickly forgotten. The 5200 was initially conceived in the late 1970s, but the project was scrapped in order to start their home computer line. The ideas for the 5200 were rekindled in response to the Mattel Intellivision, but this console would wind up being a direct competitor for the ColecoVision. This system did not do well commercially, especially when compared to its predecessor, which was renamed to the Atari 2600. While it had superior graphics to the 2600 and Mattel's Intellivision, the system was initially incompatible with the 2600's expansive library of games. And since both the Intellivision and eventually the ColecoVision would also be able to play Atari 2600 games, they eventually remade the system with an adapter in order to make it backwards compatible. In the end, users and reviewers were particularly critical of the system, mainly involving its controller. And though its internals were very similar to Atari's 8-bit computer line that was out at the same time, it would not reach the same level of success. And this is most definitely reflected in the number of games in its library, totaling around 70. So keep in mind, as I have compiled this list of 10 essential games for the Atari 5200, that there are not that many games to choose from due to its limited game library. It should also be noted that I am not going to include games that are backwards compatible, I am just going to include games that were made for this system specifically. For a detailed explanation on what makes an essential game for my lists, you may want to go back and watch my 10 essential games for the Atari 2600 video, as I explain this criteria in further detail. That said, let's go ahead and dive right into my recommendations. I will note before we begin, the audio-video quality will vary a little bit because some of the games I was able to capture using original hardware, and other footage was captured via emulator. First, I'm going to recommend the game Centipede. On top of being a stellar arcade game from my childhood, I believe that this game was also very well done on the 5200. For those of you that may not be familiar with Centipede, this is a fixed arcade shooter game that was released in 1980 initially. The player fights off centipedes, spiders, scorpions, and fleas, completing a round after eliminating the centipede that winds its way down the playfield. I believe this game truly embodies the Atari philosophy, easy to pick up, but difficult to master. And although this game is playable with the joystick, I would definitely recommend playing it with the Atari trackball controller that was available on this console. With this combination, I think that this makes it the closest arcade port you could get on a home console by far. And also, since I'm recommending the trackball controller, you would definitely have to have Missile Command as well. This game was also a 1980 arcade game released by Atari. In this game, the player controls a crosshair that moves around the sky via a trackball. Depending on which button the player presses depends on which of his defenses are launched into the sky. Another simple to pick up game, but very addictive as the levels later on get very challenging. I really feel like the Atari 5200 port is done very well, but is definitely benefited by having the trackball controller to be able to control your player, giving it a more arcade feel. One of the major selling points of the Atari 5200 was that it offered a better port of Pac-Man than the Atari 2600, and this would be exclusive to this console at least for a little while. Pac-Man is one of those classic and iconic titles that is still enjoyed today, so I really do believe that this would be something that you would enjoy on the Atari 5200. One thing I think is very unique to this console is that it has a different look to be able to accommodate the extra wide screen that the player would have, rather than the more narrow view the monitor in the arcade would give. Even if you compare this to the more arcade-accurate port that was on the Nintendo Entertainment System years later, this game fills up more of the screen, and hence, I feel like it belongs more on a home console than that other version. It did take me a little bit to get used to the non-centering joystick, but once you do, I feel like this game still provides a good experience. Next up, I will recommend Robotron 2084. This is a 2D multi-directional shooter game in which the player controls the on-screen protagonist from a top-down perspective. When this game was released, it shipped with a special joystick coupler that allowed you to use both of the 5200's controllers to play this game as it was meant to be played. The looser feeling of the Atari's 5200 analog sticks really makes this game a lot easier to play than on other home consoles, I believe. And again, I believe it gives it more of that arcade feel of this time period. In terms of graphics and sound, this game does an admirable job for the time period of recreating the experience, although you can tell there were some sacrifices in the graphics that had to be made. Still, I think that kind of adds to this charm, as it's a version you won't see anywhere else. So if you can, I would definitely recommend picking up a copy of this game for the Atari 5200. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Beam Rider is one of my favorite games of this time period from Activision, and I would definitely recommend it on this console, as it still provides a very good experience. In this game, the player is trying to clear the Earth's atmosphere shield of 99 sectors of all enemy spacecrafts. This game is a significant upgrade over the Atari 2600 version, putting it on par with the game that I played a long time ago, which was the Commodore 64 version. If you like the early shooting games of the 1980s, then this is one you should definitely try out. The next game I would recommend is Star Raiders, that was released in 1982. This was originally designed for Atari's computer line in 1979 to show off their advanced capabilities. However, it was popular enough to later port to the Atari 2600, ST, as well as the 5200. In this game, you're treated to a first-person view of a cockpit, going through space, with your goal to go from sector to sector, via your trusty galactic chart, clearing each area of pesky Xylon ships. This game is both a nostalgic treat for those that grew up with it, but also for those of you wanting to go back and play games on this console, this may also be a surprise, as it offers an experience I think that is unique to this game for this era. And of course, as we're still in this generation of consoles, the iconic grandfather to all platforming games has to be mentioned as an essential game. Again, I did find Pitfall a little hard to get used to at first because of that non-centering joystick, but after a while it became a non-issue. In the case of the 5200 having a very limited library, I would also recommend getting Pitfall 2 for your console as well. h.e.r.o is a game that almost didn't make the list due to the fact that this is one of the more expensive titles that I would recommend for this system. However, I do feel like this game was very well done on the Atari 5200. There are obvious graphical upgrades from the Atari 2600 version, and it still offers that same addictive gameplay that people fell in love with on the other system. And if I can only recommend one more game for the Atari 5200, it would be Kicks. Kicks is a simple puzzle game where players attempt to uncover a playing field by drawing a series of rectangular boxes while avoiding the roaming Kicks spikes. The simplistic and innovative formula around this game made it an instant hit in the arcades in the early 1980s, and because the graphics in the arcade were relatively simplistic, the Atari 5200 is able to stay very true to the original. Well, there you have it. There's my list of 10 essential games you should have if you own an Atari 5200. Again, I want to remind you that this is not a ranked list, so the order of the games does not matter, and if a game did not appear on this list, it does not mean I believe that game is bad or unworthy, it just means that for one reason or another, I wouldn't recommend it as an essential game. But that said, what did you think of my list? Did I miss any games that I should have included? Be sure to let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are, and if you'd like to see a part 2, make sure you leave a like on this video before you head out. That said, I do want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. If you like this video and you'd like to help out with future projects on this channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Also, if you enjoy the content of this channel, please remember to click on this subscribe button. Again, I want to thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.